Welcome back everyone to Gotcha Interact. Today we're going to be talking about the kind of problem that has popped up recently with the issue between the FTC and Genshin. Recently Genshin got in a little bit of hot water, or specifically Hoyoverse got in a little bit of hot water because of the issues surrounding their specific ideas with kind of supposedly going towards their ideas with the pity system, as well as looking at how wishes are looked at. There's a lot of issues surrounding how easy it is to understand how money turns into specifically wishes, and there's a lot of kind of confusion. But specifically what the actual problem really comes down to is Hoyoverse has been selling and marketing, as well as gathering information from children that are under the age of 16 without parental consent, which goes against a major law called GACHA, which we'll talk about soon. Now, I'm going to be reading through the entire article here from the FTC. If you guys, number one, want to either read along or read it yourself and skip this part, you can. Rift is going to go ahead and put a link at the bottom in our description, or at the top of our description, specifically looking at this article. So make sure you guys, if you guys want to, go check this. This is specifically from the Federal Trade Commission, which is a part of the US government, so it does have some legitimacy there. And if you guys also want as well, you guys can go ahead and just skip to the timestamp right there on your screen right now. Go ahead and check there if you guys want to just skip me just reading this entire article. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and just kind of look at this specifically here. So at the beginning, it states that the maker of the video game Genshin Impact has agreed to pay $20 million and to block children under 16 from making in-game purchases without parental consent to settle Federal Trade Commission allegations the company violated a children's privacy law and deceived children and other users about the real cost of in-game transactions and odds of obtaining rare prizes. Genshin Impact deceived children, teens, and other players into spending hundreds of dollars on prizes they stood little chance of winning, said Samuel Levine, director of the FTC's Bureau of Consumer Protection. Companies that deploy these dark pattern tactics will be held accountable if they deceive players, particularly kids and teens, about the true cost of in-game transactions. A complaint filed by the Department of Justice upon referral from the Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, alleged that the Singapore-based Cognosphere and its California-based subsidiary, Cognosphere LLC, which do business in the United States as Hoyoverse, actively marketed Genshin Impact to children and collected personal information from them in violation of the Children's Online Privacy Protection Rule, or COPPA. The complaint further charged that Hoyoverse deceived players about the odds of winning particular sought-after 5-star loot box prizes and how much it would cost to open these loot boxes to win those prizes. It is also alleged that the confusing virtual currency system that players had to navigate to open these boxes or open up the loot boxes, and the marketing and promotion tactics used to entice players to open loot boxes were unfair to children and teenagers. Popular among children and teens, Genshin Impact is free to download and has generated significant revenue through the sale of in-game virtual currency and other content. Players advance in the game by collecting virtual heroes, forming a team, and using other heroes' abilities. It kind of just talks about how the game works. The complaint alleges that Genshin Impact's purchasing process obscures the reality that consumers commonly must spend large amounts of real money to obtain 5-star prizes, and that some children have spent hundreds or even thousands of dollars to win them. The complaint alleges that the system is challenging and confusing, particularly for children and teens. Players must exchange real dollars for bundles of virtual currency that then have to be re-exchanged multiple times to open loot boxes, with exchange rates in usual denominations. This complicated system, according to the complaint, misleads consumers about the amount of money that players must spend on loot boxes on an ongoing basis, and the amount of money that players would likely need to spend to obtain certain prizes. Hoyoverse drives consumer demand for Genshin Impact's loot boxes through several promotional channels inside and outside the game, which advertise that desirable prizes will be available only on a limited basis, according to the complaint. This includes the virtual in-game event banners to promote these limited prizes and social media influencers to glamorize the excitement of opening the loot boxes. Genshin Impact uses anime-style cartoon graphics, bright and colorful animation, and several characters who have the speech or appearance of children to appeal to children. Hoyoverse has spent millions of dollars hiring social media influencers, many of whom are popular with children, to promote Genshin Impact to their respective audiences on social media platforms including YouTube, TikTok, and the video game streaming site Twitch. The complaint alleges that the company's event banners and influencer campaigns give players the impression that they will have better odds of obtaining the 5-star prize being promoted than they have in actual reality. Now looking at COPPA violations, in addition to unfairly marketing loot boxes to children, the complaint alleges that Hoyoverse failed to comply with the COPPA rule, which requires online services and websites directed to children under 13 to notify parents about the personal information they collect and to obtain verifiable parental consent before collecting and using any personal information collected from children. The complaint alleges that Genshin Impact is a child-directed online service that collects personal information from children under the age of 13, and therefore is required by COPPA to notify parents about the information they collect from the children, and to obtain their consent for the collection of that personal data. The complaint, however, alleges that even though Hoyoverse was aware that children under the age of 13 were using its service, it continued to collect personal information from children and use it without obtaining parental consent or complying with the other COPPA requirements. Hoyoverse shared with third-party analytic firms and advertisers user IDs, as well as a device-related persistent identifiers to track players' progress, purchases, settings, and friend lists, according to the complaint. Under the proposed order, which must be approved by a federal judge before it can go into effect, Cognisphere Ltd. And Cognisphere LLC will be required to pay a $20 million monetary penalty and make changes to address the allegations outlined in the complaint. The companies will be: Number 1, prohibited from allowing children under the age of 16 to purchase loot boxes in their video games without a parent's affirmative express consent. Number 2, prohibited from selling loot boxes with using virtual currency without providing an option for consumers to purchase them directly with real money. Number 3, prohibited from misrepresenting loot box odds, prices, and features. And number 4, requiring to disclose loot box odds and exchange rates for multi-tiered virtual currency. Number 5, required to delete any personal information previously collected from children under the age of 13 unless they obtained parental consent to retain such data. And finally, required to comply with COPPA, including its notice and consent requirements. That was a lot of reading. In a very basic sense, Genshin had issues with supposedly their wishing system doesn't really make any sense. So buying Genesis crystals, turning that into either cosmetics and skins, turning them into primos, which is then how you're going to then use them for fates, for wishing, which there's two different types of wishing. That has become a problem in kind of the currency change. Also keep in mind that there is a different currency, obviously based around the whole world, for the same bundle. So if you pay, you'll pay a certain amount in American dollars versus Canadian. So because I believe the American dollar is worth more than the Canadian dollar, then you'll pay more Canadian to actually get the same value that an American does. So there's already a conversion happening there with the different denominations that it talked about, as well as then the multiple changes in the game to actually get your quote-unquote prize or your characters in Genshin. So that's kind of the first issue that pops up. The major issue, though, that is the biggest factor here is the idea of them selling to children under the age of 13, which is pre-teenager. So that's kind of the bigger problem here. And then also the idea of they're doing it without the parental care, basically caregiver or parental consent to actually take any data that they've taken in the first place, as well as taking that previous thing about kind of the wishing system and how maybe difficult it is to understand, and then selling that to teenagers and kids as well, with the major problem being a lot of influencers and everything do like wishing summons for people, or only show when you get a 5-star, which is in an ad. Usually with those ads, you'll see somebody like win a character, and it almost seems super easy, but it's actually really difficult, depending on how the kind of luck kind of throws your way. So that's what's happening here. Enough of me rambling and actually talking about what's happening here, Rift. What are your initial thoughts when you first came to this?
Well, honestly, some of my initial thoughts were, wait, what's confusing about the currency exchange? What's confusing about the game's laying out the odds for you? Because I thought I was going crazy reading a lot of comments online, on other creators' videos, Twitter, and other platforms. A lot of people actually resonate and do feel like that, yeah, when I was starting out, it was very confusing how the wishing system worked, the 50-50, the pity system, all of it. And I feel like I wasted some wishes early on and yada, yada, yada. So a lot of people tend to agree with that from what I've seen. And I just felt like I was going crazy, or like I've got to be missing something because I just don't relate. The wishing system, when I learned how it worked, and also to give more context, Genshin was the first gacha I ever played. I didn't play Arc Knights or anything before Genshin. So gacha as a whole was actually new to me, not just Genshin Impact. And even then, the way that Hoyoverse outlined it inside Genshin Impact still made sense to me. And I, when I did the math on things, okay, 160 Prima Gems is a wish. Okay, so I need to always take my amount of Prima Gems, divide that by 160, and that's how many wishes I have. And so I just, I guess I never thought about, like, hey, why can't we just buy a Fate straight up? And so while I can understand the argument for, yeah, we have to do all this currency exchange, at the same time, it's not confusing to me, and I'm sure there's other people that also feel the same way, as well as we'll also look at some other creators' opinions. So that's just kind of my initial standpoint on it, was like, hold on, I don't understand how it's confusing. I'm confused on why people think it was confusing, because the game does kind of just lay it out if you read it.
Confusion about the confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely when I first started the game, I mean, had played other gachas, so it was a little different for me. But there was a specific kind of idea, and especially playing Honkai Impact 3rd, so another Hoyo game before Genshin, gave me a little bit of an edge. But even in general with gachas, different characters, different things, different systems work totally different. It's just like kind of understanding a character's kit, right? Like when you kind of learn about a character's kit, it's going to be different than some others, right? So I think initially with the difficulty of maybe its understanding, I didn't have that problem. Does that mean that that problem didn't exist? No. And that's mainly shown because the idea really comes down to a lot of other people actually did have issues, like you said, Rift.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, specifically jumping over into Doro, which is a pretty well-known content creator specifically for Genshin, a lot of Hoyoverse games. He said not to defend the multi-billion-dollar company, which it seems like is a terrible thing to do now, which honestly, fair enough. Like, they don't need lawyers, they've got their own. But aren't the gacha mechanics explained in-game? Which is kind of what Rift and I have both kind of just said. Like, if you really think about it, there's the details section button you can easily click. It's not some small question mark. In other gacha games, it's a really small question mark that's really difficult to find sometimes. They usually hollow it out so that it's not really easy to see, because they don't want you to know the odds because it's really difficult. Genshin, on the other hand, it's a part of the details section and a big white button usually on the bottom of the screen. So for me, on the other hand, it was kind of easy to see, but hey. Also, it's Doro stated that if you're allowing your kids to spend your money in a gacha game, then that's just bad parenting. I'm not sorry. But I will say implementing more protective measures so that kids don't go spending money they shouldn't isn't a bad thing. So he's kind of playing devil's advocate with himself here. He's saying, like, personally, I feel like it's just bad parenting for just people to not keep their kids in check, while also saying at the end of the day, though, if there is bad parenting, or if a kid just happens to get the ability to do so, to kind of pay for things in a way that he shouldn't, then, or she shouldn't, or whatever, they shouldn't, it doesn't matter. Hoyoverse should at least have something in place. So he's kind of playing devil advocate for himself. And I think that's, once again, where the biggest problem comes from. It's not necessarily that, I think, when you actually think about it, right, they stated here a lot about the age of 13 over and over again, even when we get into COPPA violations. But now they're stating that anything under the age of 16, you can't do without parental consent. Personally, for me, that screams that once you're in the age of 16, I believe in the US, you can actually start working legally, and it's okay, I believe. So if that's the case, I think that's what they're kind of doing here. Once you get to the age of 16, you start to get a paycheck, you start to do actual work. You don't just do some chores and your parents give you a $5 bill, right? You actually start to or if your grandma gives you $20 for your birthday or whatever. It's not like that. What it's saying here is kind of when you hit the age of 16, in my mind, you have the ability to go out and get a job and actually understand how real currency works and how that actually kind of changes everything. And I think that's what they're trying to state here, is that once you get to that age, you can actually start to understand, okay, this amount of money gets me this much. Is that worth it or not for me? But when you're a kid, you don't understand. You understand that 4 quarters in American currency equals $1 American, but you don't think oh, okay, well, you don't really understand money. Okay, well, $100 only gets me 50 wishes without the double.
The true value of money.
Right. Your value of money goes out the wazoo, which is totally fair because you're a kid. You're not supposed to be thinking about that type of stuff. So I definitely understand where the main issue comes from. Initially, I don't think that the problem comes from the understanding of the game necessarily about how the system works. Personally, I don't feel like that's the problem. But if it does allow Genshin to maybe make it easier for people coming into the sphere, into gachas, and maybe understanding it better, that's not necessarily to say that I'm against that either, because anything to help out players understand the game more, I'm all for. But I do think also the biggest problem is with Genshin Impact kind of taking information knowingly, supposedly, from people at this point in time that are under the age of 13 was the biggest problem, going against those copper rules, which that's what they're really getting paid a fine for. I don't think that the change of money and kids not understanding how money works really was the problem here. I think it was actually going against the violations that were set in place.
Yeah, a lot of what you say I agree with. I still do think that, obviously, the commission thinks that there is an issue with deceptive marketing. That is getting touched on, and a lot of people will jump on that and agree that, yeah, Genshin doesn't lay it out well enough. And I think they do, at least for me. It makes sense. I know what I'm paying for, but that's me. I'm not everyone. Some people probably aren't knowing what they're paying, or they can take it to mean something else. Just how perspective is, if you look at it a certain way. Now, at the bottom of the article from the commission, they list several things that they're going to want to see changed. Number one, prohibiting from allowing children under 16 to purchase loot boxes in their video games. What they mean by loot boxes in the case of Genshin Impact, they're talking about the event wishes for the characters. Now, I have seen some talk that, oh, it means just the character alone, or it means it's talking about the banner. I think it's talking about the banner because even the commission outlined above that, it started to talk about the event wish system. So prohibiting 16-year-olds and under, they can't actually use money on the game without a parent's consent. So yeah, like we've kind of gone over and stated, and a lot of people online have as well, that can't be a bad thing. That's only helpful. Prohibiting from selling loot boxes using virtual currency without providing an option for consumers to purchase them directly. Now, this one is probably the most interesting one to me, because when I think about this, so let's say Venti finally gets his rerun, or even Risley, because they both need reruns. We have the gacha system. Now, based on everything that the commission's touched on for Hoyoverse here, they're saying it's deceptive because there's not the option to just outright buy the character. We don't know the value because it's all behind a gacha system. It's all behind chance. It's like, okay, that's fair to a degree, right? So say they add to the shop a Venti bundle where you can just straight up buy Venti. C0 Venti, here you go. He's just gonna land in your account. Kind of like we can already buy 4 stars that do come around in the shop. That's just with Star Glitter. So that's a different currency. That probably could be up for discussion if you want, because that's a currency you only get by wishing. But the principle of it, where they put a character in the shop, you can outright buy it. And some other gacha games actually do this, where you already have to obtain the character via gacha, but after you do, you can actually just straight up buy Eidolons. I know Withering Waves does that, but just like that, if we have the option to just straight up buy a limited character, Venti in this case, from the shop for like $300 or whatever, they're at least giving you, hey, here's the value of what it would be, or could potentially be using the gacha system. The thing is, most of us know that actually employing and using the gacha system to try to get Venti, if you're trying to get the character, that's always going to be better 100% of the time, every single day of the week, because you have that chance to actually get the character before having used $300 worth of currency, because you could win the 50-50. You could get an early and win the 50-50. $300 is just roughly the amount that's required to guarantee a character. If you're from 0 pity going full pity, you lose, then you go full pity again. It's roughly $300 to $400. So what they're saying here is they'd have to at least provide the option for consumers to purchase them directly with real money, and that means they can keep it the way it is. They just have to make sure that's there because of legal reasons, to be like, hey, this is the value. The funny thing is that no one should actually be buying a character that way, because you're essentially losing your 50-50 by buying that.
You're forcing yourself to go to 90 wishes. Now, here's the other thing to keep in mind really quick about the wish system and the pity system. Once you hit in the character banner, once you hit 74 wishes, you go from a minimal chance to exponentially, every wish after 74 exponentially increases your chances to get the character. And then it goes to 100% once you hit 89, the next wish is 100% chance to be a 5-star. And then if you lose your 50-50, the idea with the 50-50 is like, if you have done no wishing on your account at all, ever, and then you go on the banner, if you drop a 5-star character, you see gold, it is a 50-50 chance to either be the on-banner character, Venti in this instance, or the other 50% chance is to be any of the standard characters in a pool of standard characters, which is another list of a bunch of probabilities. So that's kind of how that works, which, like you said, you're forcing yourself to not only lose 90 wishes and go hard pity every single time, now you're doubling it, making sure that your 50-50s aren't 50-50s anymore. It's 0-100. You're gonna lose every single time. So it's there at least for people who want to do it. Should you ever do it? No, because it physically is just the wrong
You're
way
paying
to do
full
it.
price for something that you actually really
You have the
have a
ability
good
to
chance
get.
of not paying full
Right.
price for.
Right.
Some inevitably do end up paying full price because that's just how chance works. There has to be that 1, 2, up to 10% that are just on that side of the bell curve that they're going to lose the 50-50. They're going to go up to 80 both times. That's just going to happen. It's happened to me. But that's the whole magic of gacha, and it's all about chance, and that's kind of the thrill of the game. That kind of is half the game. It's not like half the game is the story and the good character. I know this is arguable at this point. Some people don't like Natlan, some people didn't like other regions, but the actual gameplay, fighting in the abyss, the story, that's almost really just half the game. The other half of the game is the banners, the gacha system. It's a gacha game. So to completely take that out of the picture, I'm not saying like, because that's not what's happening, but just imagine like if you take that out of the picture and now it's just you pay a flat price for just everything, all the characters, the weapons, it's not a gacha game anymore. It's just it's a open world RPG, and you can just buy a character or buy this character or whatever.
You are basically changing the game, like you said, though. Like,
Yeah.
if they do this. Now, it's not necessarily changing the game in the other aspects, I understand what you're saying, but you are changing it for people who just straight up buy the character. But anyways, I think there was some very interesting, the next one doesn't make a lot of sense for me. They misrepresented loot box odds, prices, and features. Maybe you could let me know in the comments. The prices are easily displayed for everything. The primos to Genesis crystals are 1-for-1, so that really shouldn't be that difficult to really make the changeover. And then, like Riff was talking about at the beginning, you have however many wishes or primos or Genesis crystals just divided by 160. That's how many times you can.
Yeah, and that's where it starts to talk about like requiring to disclose loot box odds and exchange rates for multi-tiered virtual currency. That exchange rates for multi-tiered, that's changing your Genesis crystals to Primogems and then changing your Primogems to Fates.
And just making sure people know that it takes 160 of Genesis crystals, like 1-for-1.
Yeah.
Like maybe stating that one Genesis crystal equals 1 Primogem, and 160 Primogems equals 1 Fate, or specifically here an intertwined Fate. So maybe those things need to be specifically stated. But in my personal opinion, this is also could just be thrown into a very gray area where they just kind of throw it at the bottom of a detail section again. So to an extent, how much would this really help? Because they're just going to follow in suit and do what they want, but it's not like they're going to put this on a big banner in front of the character and be like 1-for-1 and 1 over, X over 160, and that's how you get primos or wishes. I think it's just going to be buried under another detail section that no one's ever going to see and no one's ever going to look at. So I don't really see how it helps too much, but I'm not the FTC and I'm not Genshin, so we'll see how it works in the future.
Yeah, all of this just makes me curious to see how are they actually going to implement changes. That's because they're obviously based right here on this bullet point list. They're going to have to make some changes. They've already agreed to pay the $20 million fine, so we are going to see changes most likely. And this could also affect Honkai Star Rail, Zenless, because those are both Hoyoverse games. This isn't just a Genshin Impact thing.
Every other game out there,
just because
Genshin's the big one.
Yeah, exactly, the head honcho. And so that's probably why they're getting on this one, right? Genshin Impact. It's the biggest even of the three, Honkai Star Rail and Zenless. It just is. So I'm curious to see how they change it. I will say one thing I'm nervous about. If we are kind of looking at the second bullet point again, giving that option to just outright buy a character or whatever, it's the principle of it for me. It makes me nervous because, like we were talking about, almost always, pretty much always, you're going to end up spending less money using the gacha system than using the option to just buy it, because that's paying full price, which most likely you don't ever have to do. And so I'm nervous about that because it could start this whole cycle all over again, because now it's going to be people not knowing how it worked, or they're very new to the game and they see the shop oh, I can get this character for $300, and let's just say that doesn't faze them. They know what they're paying for. They see the $300 marker, and they're like, yeah, that's in my gaming budget. I want this character. And they use that to buy the character. Then later find out, oh, I could use the gacha system and maybe only spent $120. And to have that realization, that could, like for me, that would be an immense pang of regret to find out that I just paid full price and didn't have to, potentially. So I just kind of see it could create this cyclical thing where, well, we have to say it because COPPA rules in FTC. We have to put that there legally. But yeah, it is always better. Like, people would have to make videos on that. People would have to say, look, we know this option's here, but don't use it. You need to actually use the gacha system because you have a pretty big chance to get a character before having spent $300. It still may happen a couple times, like it's chance, but that chance of still paying the same full price is a pretty low chance. You have to lose the 50-50, which that's a 50-50, but going to pity as well. Like if you go past 74, your chances start going up pretty significantly. So it's a chance, but it's still better than just straight up paying full price every single time. Like I can't imagine a player always using the shop to get their characters. That's insane to me.
And that's not even counting free to play. I mean, people don't pay at all a single dime in the game and still get characters. So I don't know. It's a very, like you said, I think I didn't even think about that. That's really also going to create problems. So once again, we have issues that still could come from this. Somehow the community is going to take this as Genshin is having to put this in because the FTC kind of forces them to. And I know a part of the community is going to go, oh, greedy, hungry, Hoyoverse is coming back at it again and putting a $300 bundle in the shop. And don't do it, people. It's a greedy company and they're making you do this and they're making you do. And all of us in the background are like, okay, but the FTC forced them to do it. So,
yeah.
Okay, they don't do it and they're greedy scumbags. They do it, and now they're greedy scumbags for putting a $300 price on a character when you really don't have to pay most of the time. I would even say the odds are heavily in your favor to not pay $300.
Right.
So I think this is going to cause a lot of issues. I think it's necessary to happen, though, and we're just going to have to go with the growing pains. So I'm not against it. I'm going to go for it. I'm just calling like I see it. It's going to happen. I'm okay with it, but it's going to happen, and we're going to just have to keep going. And it's just what it is.
Because I think at the end of the day, people look at the gacha system. It's not just getting the character that provides the thrill. It's the act of throwing a 10 pull in and seeing if you get something. Even if it's not gold, it's like,
baby.
What 4-star am I getting? Is it a weapon? Is it a character? Is it a character I don't have?
Well,
it's doing the gacha is the dopamine rush. You know what I mean?
Well, you might be happy about 4 stars, but the rest of us.
Okay, that's fair. That's true. Yes. Okay.
No,
but you know what I mean? Like,
point.
I'm at 28 pity. I could. It's the chance is there, and even a kid is still gonna, anyone. This isn't even age related. Anyone is gonna get that dopamine rush or have that kind of desire. Like, I kind of want to. I want to try pulling again. I want one more 10 pull. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't completely solve the problem. What would solve the problem is that first bullet, and that's actually restricting a purchase unless there's consent there.
Right, which that's going to be interesting in and of itself. I mean, is it just going to be a check mark? Do you just say, yeah, I'm 16 and older? As a 12-year-old's just like, yeah, I'm 16. Like, bruh, I'm 35. I mean, when I was younger, like everybody used to just throw like the scalar back to 1862. Like, I don't really see how that's going to help too much. Like a 162-year-old is somehow playing, Cookie Run or something. So either way, I think there's a lot to kind of be seen. We're not necessarily dogging on Genshin. Well, a little bit, just a little bit, because what they kind of did was a little scummy. But I think outside of that, the idea of maybe the community, I'm interested to see what Genshin does to maybe fall in line with what happens here, like we've both stated. And I'm interested to see how the community is going to take this once it's finally implemented. Because I personally don't think people have read through this document and understand that specifically, like you said, that second bullet point. I don't think they understand what that means. I don't think people are going to be waiting for a $300 price tag on a Raiden Shogun. I really don't think people are going to be ready for it, and I think they're going to be very mad whenever they see it, because they're going to be like, what do you mean? I'm a free-to-play, and I've never had to pay $1 in my life. Like, no. It'll be very interesting. If you guys did like the video though, please go ahead and like and subscribe. If you guys have any other thoughts, let us know down in the comments. Let us know how you guys actually think about this. You know, getting more to know about the community is definitely helpful to kind of gauge what everybody thinks. Also check out our Discord. We do have a pretty big group of people over there. If you guys want to go ahead and check out our Discord as well, we talk a lot about the gachas as well as stuff like this, as well as just whatever, just random stuff that we might be doing. So if you guys want to, please go ahead and check that out. The link should be in the description. Thank you guys once again for watching the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.